Have you ever thought what would be if we don't need businesses anymore? If everything we need we can provide ourselves or by the help of a friend? A world where we share resources and only use them when we need them. That exactly is the basic idea of the sharing economy. And I want to talk today with my guests about what is the current state of the sharing economy. Is that still the case? And where is the sharing economy going? So without further ado, let's start the show. So welcome to a new episode of All About Service. Our topic today is the sharing economy, a concept that has disrupted many industries, and I'm sure we all have one or two or even more experiences with this kind of economy. I'm happy to have again two guests for the show, and I welcome Sabine Benoit from University of Surrey and Hugo Guyader from Linkoeping University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Glad to be here.
So before we start, let's look a little bit at your personal experience with the sharing economy. Maybe, Sabine, I start with you. So what was your first experience with the sharing economy?
Honestly, that's actually quite interesting because I started doing research on the sharing economy before Uber and Airbnb have actually started their businesses in Europe. So, and that goes back to 2009, 2008 maybe, where there was a designer handbag platform emerging in Frankfurt. And I'm not really into designer handbags, but I thought, oh, that's a really interesting concept that you can basically have a subscription for a handbag. You send it back, you get a new one, and so forth. So I started doing research on this. And had the first publication in 2010 about that. And who would have known back then that it would become that big? So back then, we didn't call it sharing economy. That term wasn't even coined. We call it non-ownership service. That goes back to Lovelock and Gummerson. But still, I think I go back quite a long way with the sharing economy before it was even called like that.
And Hugo, how is it with you? So when did you use the last time the sharing economy?
I think before I moved to Sweden, when I was still living in France, I started to carpool a lot to go to friends' places or to go for a weekend. So either I would drive or either I would post an offer online and get some people in the car. So we basically travel a bit cheaper. And then I started my Ph.D. in this whole business model about just having a website online for people to organize themselves. Like some people complained about the platformatization of this whole thing. So they basically started to take a commission and there was a discussion about what is the sharing economy. I said, I should study that because I can leverage my experience with carpooling and how the sector has changed in the last 10 years. So I started carpooling.
So what do you think? What fascinates you about the sharing economy that you started to dedicate that to your main research area, if I see it right?
I think there was this helping each other aspect, which I found it interesting. And then some businesses made platforms more efficient, more convenient, more safer. So I thought it was interesting, this intersections of two worlds in a way, like the world social and altruistic, and then the world let's make a business out of it and to make it more efficient. So I found it interesting how practices change.
Okay, Sabine, how is it with you? What is for you the fascinating element of the sharing economy?
If I look at it like as a scholar, I think what is fascinating is that almost all questions need to be applied again in the sharing economy. So let's take complaint management. Because we have a triangle of actors, if there's a complaint in a sharing economy context, let's say Airbnb or Uber, it's not clear who has to recover. So is it the driver that consumers expect something of, or is it the platform? So if there's something goes wrong, who has to recover? Or, the whole idea of branding. So how do you manage these sort of external actors as your sort of face of your brand when they drive Uber cars? So, and there are all sorts of questions that come up that are basically totally unknown as a research field.
So can you tell me your most favorite example of the sharing economy? Sabine, Hugo, who wants to start?
My favorite is Upwork. So honestly, I could not live without Upwork. It's a freelance platform of experts, and whenever you search for somebody, whether it be to enter your data, to subscribe or to transcribe your interviews, to do a video, or to help with anything, there will be somebody somewhere in the world that likes to get that gig, if we refer to the gig economy. And it's very, very transparent. It's super easy. I've worked with dozens of people that I've never ever talked to in my entire life, not even talked to, nor seen. And I think from, let's say, sort of 20, 30, 40 projects per year, I had one bad experience in the last couple of years. So that is my favorite sharing economy or gig economy example that I can highly recommend to anybody that searches for some expert on something.
Hugo.
I think I will stick with my experience with carpooling, or ride sharing as we call it in Europe, and mention BlaBlaCar, the French startup that it began like 2004, 5, 6 and started to facilitate basically hitchhiking, but hitchhiking 2.0, in that it's I give lift to some people, and passengers find lift that from other cars that go in the same direction. So this platform make it all easier, safer, with having some review system, online payment. They have customer service where people can ring and ask how does it work. They use the most expert in the community to moderate the website, take out wrong posts, or help others.
When we talk about the sharing economy, I have the feeling there's so many concepts around, and I'm sometimes confused what they all mean and how they differ from each other. So I thought about a small game, I would call it, and I give you one term and you have one sentence or two, and just to explain that very briefly, maybe an example or so. So let's start that. Sabine, your term is access-based economy.
The term access-based economy basically wants to put emphasis on the fact that that consumers are moving over from not having to own things, but only having access to things. And the term is quite broad. So it can include rental car, but it can also include Uber. It just means that you have access to resources rather than owning resources. So, and this access is temporal in time, and it does not sort of cover all rights that are usually come with ownership.
Do you have an example?
Classical example of access-based services would be Zipcar or any rental car company, where we only have two actors and consumers have access to a certain resource.
The second term, gig economy. Go.
I think gig economy is the very extreme part of the sharing economy. It's more like related to on-demand services. So it's a lot about freelancers, contractors that are not employees, but do almost as such. So they provide mostly intangible services, like getting a ride through Uber, or getting a delivery, or getting a task done on TaskRabbit.
Next one, collaborative economy. Sabine.
The term collaborative economy or collaborative consumption is, in my view, we can almost say is the equivalent term to the sharing economy, but used by academics. So in my experience, academics use the term collaborative economy or collaborative consumption, whereas in the managerial world, the term sharing economy is much more present. So and there's this whole debate in academia about, where's the collaboration or where's the sharing, or is that really sharing what we're talking about? I don't really want to get bogged down into these terminology, but because all these different terms have a lot of overlap in my view. It's just a matter of that they put a spotlight on a certain aspect of this whole phenomenon. And the term collaborative economy puts the spotlight on the fact that we're all in this together and that we're collaborating in using our resources or each other's resources.
And I think I can maybe add that it doesn't limit the collaborative economy paradigm doesn't limit itself to consumption, but we can also talk about production with all this makerspace, fab labs, collaborative finance with peer-to-peer financing, or these different co-ownerships model, co-housing. So it's much more broad than just consumption.
The sharing economy oxymoron. Hugo, what is that?
Basically, sharing and economy are two terms that oppose each other. And sharing economy, as where it started, was much more collaborative and much more about sharing between families and friends. And then there is this critique that these traditional exchanges have been financialized, monetized, Uberized. So that would represent the economic aspect. And so these two terms kind of form a paradox and in the practices and also in academia, like how we discuss what is the sharing economy. And so there's been always these tensions between the economic aspect, market exchange, and the sharing, very communal and very altruistic and based on solidarity.
When the sharing economy started, there were high hopes in the sharing economy and what it all can bring. And I know from our pre-meetings that you are sometimes, you see a lot of misconception, even myths that are circling around the sharing economy. And I thought I want to give you here a platform and a chance, an opportunity to play MythBuster. So really debunking some of them. So you gave me already some of these kind of myths. So I will play them back and it's your time to explain us why is that wrong. Shall we do this?
Absolutely.
So, Hugo, the myth is, the sharing economy is about sharing.
Yeah, that's a classic newspaper or HBR cover back in 2015, I think, where we were all talking about sharing, but it was not really about sharing as we discussed that it's non-profit and communal, but it's actually about rental. So most of the examples that we talk about today, it's about monetary transactions between people. That get access to some things, a good or a service, like something intangible, in exchange of money. So it's not sharing; it's a rental. It's different.
Sabine, the sharing economy is good for the environment.
Initially, the idea was that in the sharing economy, we're making use of excess resources. So we're making use of resources that are not used elsewhere. And it goes back to the idea that anybody's car is basically standing around most of the time. Let's say 90% maybe. And that's probably even too low. So if we would, engage in something like Uber, the usage of that particular car would be better. So we would make use of excess resources that would not be used otherwise. Nowadays, we know that more and more of Uber drivers, for example, are professional Uber drivers. So they're not making really use of excess resources, but they're buying resources to be part of that system.
Yeah, and if you think about peer-to-peer car sharing, which you mentioned, if you use a car that's too old longer, it's actually not really great in terms of emissions. You increase the usage of an existing good, but it doesn't mean it's a good one.
So we have talked here about all of the elements and we see already how much it has changed over the last, let's say, 10 years. I think quite interesting is to look, of course, forward. Where is it all going? When we think about right now, we are in a lockdown or we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I think every expert says we are running into an economic crisis. and you're an expert of this field of the sharing economy. So I wonder what happens with this kind of economy. And for that, we have prepared a small game. So I give you sentences, and you have, let's say 20 seconds, 30 seconds, depends a little bit how much time you need, and to answer them very, very briefly and a little bit of explanation around it. I asked you in the pre-meeting to bring a board or papers where you write your answers. So is that ready? Good. Both of them are ready. That's really good. So here's the first one. The role of community for the sharing economy will increase or decrease? Write down. What do you think? Will it increase or decrease the role of the community? Sabine says increase. You go. So Sabine, explain.
I think the sharing economy companies will be challenged because they have to deal with sort of unprofessional peer service providers. But at the same time, I think their probability to survive this is much, much greater because they don't have all the resources. If you think about Hilton, how many empty hotels they have at the moment and how much they suffer. At the same time, Airbnb doesn't have a single cost-effective sort of property standing empty, but it's all sort of properties from you and me standing empty. So I think their probability to survive will be much higher.
Okay. Hugo, what do you have?
I would say increasing, because it becomes more important for people nowadays. I mean, after the Corona crisis, they have been isolated. People have realized that they like to have social interactions, not just digital, but also in real life. So I think people will look for more opportunities to connect with other like-minded people that have a passion for ride sharing or for traveling. So for instance, the BlaBlaCar community or the Airbnb community will basically continue to be important. If people feel like they belong to a community, then they are likely to keep using that same platform, surrounding or facilitating this community to exist.
So the next one, and I must admit that is a little bit influenced by Sabine Benoit's article about the future of the sharing economy. So I wonder a little bit how we are thinking about that right now. Though the sharing economy will create more monopolies or more atomized markets. So with a lot of players, the opposite of a monopoly. So what do you think? Where is it going? Monopoly side? Only a few players, only one player for one category, or a lot of small ones? So what do you have? Monopoly, okay. So, yeah, Sabine, tell us why.
That was difficult, but I made a choice, and that is monopolies. So I think these are typical winner takes it all markets, and the fact is, once you have sort of built your reputation in one of these platforms, it's very, very difficult to transfer that reputation to other platforms, and that makes you sticky to one platform, and that means that these platforms get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've seen that Airbnb and Uber in particular, the two prime platforms, have been growing tremendously with additional services, Uber Eats, Airbnb experiences, and we're going to see this growing and growing unless there will be somebody coming that allows the reputation to transfer from one platform to the other.
Hugo, what do you have?
Quite some confusing things a bit blended together, but I think there will be more public initiatives, actually, not just sharing initiatives by the private sector, but more from cities, governments, and some public movements. I also think then that would lead to a lot of smaller actors, maybe more regional or local actors, platforms that have, not yet to scale up. But on the other hand, the already existing platforms keep on diversifying and adding services to their existing platform. I mean, Uber is a good example, but also BlaBlaCar in France have been diversifying into offering different mobility services. So I think both towards monopolies, but also the long tail of the sharing economy as having a lot of different small actors.
Let me ask a follow-up question. If you both think that monopolies will be pretty likely dominant in the sharing economy, how much does it fit to this idea that we have that communities, that the sense of community will be more important? Is it for monopolies easy to create that, or is it not a little bit against this idea of the community?
I think Sabine would be the best place, because in the paper you mentioned, there is the social bubbles monopoly.
Yes. So, I mean, one of the big challenges from these conglomerates, big conglomerates like Uber and Airbnb, is that they have to balance out very, very carefully standardization versus authenticity. So, you book Airbnb rather than a normal hotel because you potentially want to get in contact with locals, you want to live like a local, you want to potentially cook yourself, whatever it is. So you want to delve into that life a little bit more rather than having a normal hotel. Let's take the Airbnb example. So they need to balance out that you want that authenticity, but at the same time, you're still a consumer requiring some kind of standards for that accommodation, meaning that it should be clean, it should be whatever there is, and there might be, and that's the big challenge, I think, that the monopolies in particular have to tackle.
So we will see. Let's do another one. This industry will be the next to be disrupted by the sharing economy. So what is the next industry? What do you think? Okay, here something big will happen. Banking. I know you have a fable for that. So let us know why, Sabine.
I think so. Let me start with, why has the taxi industry been disrupted by this Uber so much? Because they were just not, embracing any innovation. So what we see from polls is that people say they like using Uber because it's so easy, because you can book it on an app, you see where the driver is, you know how long it takes. Taxi companies could have done that, right? But they haven't. So you had to phone, you had to know, when you traveled, you had to know a number from the local taxi company and all of that. So, and I think industries are likely to be disrupted next that are not innovating or that are taking us hostage for their bad service. And, I don't want to bash banking, but I'm an international scholar. So I have an affiliation with an Australian university. I am born in Germany, frequently visit, but I work in the UK. That means I frequently deal with 3 different types of currencies. And if you look what my bank does to me with regards to these currencies, that is almost a robbery. And therefore I think there are already banks emerging that make use of peer-to-peer. But I think the big banks will be the next to be disrupted, because at the moment their service level and in particular the prices they charge for an international transfer, which is partly sometimes here in the UK, it's almost £15 for international transfer. Nobody can explain to me how these costs are justified. And there are banks like TransferWise that work on that peer-to-peer basis, where, if Werner wants to transfer some US dollars into euros, and at the same time Hugo wants to transfer some euros into US dollars because he's going to a conference, they just take Hugo's euros to give it to Werner's source, and they take Werner's US dollars to take it to the source that Hugo wanted. So that's a sort of peer-to-peer system. And I think that's the system TransferWise works on, and that's why the charges can be so low. That is going to be the next industry to be disrupted.
Hugo, what do you think? Which is the next industry?
I put healthcare because of the current pandemic. So I guess a lot of new initiatives started. I mean, we've seen some apps for neighbors helping each other, or for young people to do the groceries for the older people. But I also think in terms of there is a lot of skilled practitioners, nurses and doctors that can do things, and it can be done by, like, they just need to get in touch with the patients. So if platforms can do that, and there are already some that have been doing that, and facilitating booking or reservation and all of this time scheduling that is quite important in the healthcare. So I think in the future we'll see more apps related to peer-to-peer exchange in the healthcare industry, but also new kind of services and new kind of digitalized consultation that you don't need to go to the hospital anymore. And also in terms of peer reviews, the quality of the healthcare can be, I don't know if it should, but it could be then rated in one way.
Okay, so let's do a last one, and we are all academics. So what academics always ask, what should I research? So this is a topic I should research in the next 3 years. Where would you put your focus on?
My biggest challenge is, sort of trying to find the balance between standardization and authenticity. So these sharing economy platforms, they position themselves as unique because they're more authentic, because you're basically sort of getting into contact, you're living in somebody's flat, you're part of that community. But at the same time, people expect standards, and we already see that, that Airbnb is coming up with a professional level flats and some kind of standardization. Uber tries to train their drivers to make it a bit more, compliant to standards. But at the same time, they lose the authenticity.
Hugo.
I would say the platform diversification that we have seen going on, and the different buyers of adoption. So the platform diversification is like Uber diversifying its business model, trying with helicopter and Uber Eats and scooters, and so it's kind of interesting to see how they can leverage some key resources of their business model and just scale it up or expand it by changing some aspects of it. And then the buyers of adoption, I think it's interesting because it's so popular, the sharing economy, and it's been going on for at least 12 years now, as something we talked about in newspapers and everywhere. But it's still not everybody has been experiencing consumption or production, or not everybody has been trying to participate in this sharing economy. So I think it's interesting to explore the buyers for different products and services. It's different when you access car sharing through Zipcar than when you access it by renting it from neighbors. So we should identify the different paradigms and research it, and especially why people don't participate more.
So thank you very much. I think we learned already there's so many different elements of the sharing economy. There are so many different categories, so many different approaches, and so much movement in this market. So I'm sure it will be not a thriving field alone for the economy. It will be also a thriving field for academics to figure out new questions and other things. It was great to talk with you, and I hope we have soon a chance to see each other in person again. But in the meantime, please stay safe, and I thank you for the contribution here of this show. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of All About Service. I hope it was insightful for you and you learned something for yourself. If you want to know more about the service industry, about academic and management insights, please subscribe to our channel and consider joining our Facebook group, what is our most interactive channel. Till then, see you in the next video. Bye.